What's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's edition of Ask Shane Anything right here on SIFTD Games at SIFTD.net. I'm Shane Satterfield. I'm here to answer your questions about literally anything. Games, music, TV, you name it. I'm here to answer it. And this happens because a lot of you are pledging at $7 or more per month at patreon.com/SIFTD. That's that Ask Shane tier. If you like the show, it would be awesome if you consider bumping up your pledge to that higher tier. We'd really appreciate it. Even if you don't, you get to watch this show day and date with all our other patrons. But a big thanks to those people who are going above and beyond. This thing doesn't happen unless we have questions. So please head on over to SIFTD.net. In the header there's a link you can click to go to our forums where you can ask me questions about whatever you want. We have another great round of questions today. Let's get to them. All right, today's first question comes from NeoJD. Battlefield 6 technical director Christian Buell said that working on the Xbox Series S version made the whole game better and more stable. This sounds similar to what Tim Sweeney mentioned when defending Unreal Engine 5. Between the Switch 2 and the rumored lower-powered PS6 SKUs, do you think game optimization will start to be a main focus once again? All right, NeoJD, that is a great story. It's great to see most most developers complain about the Xbox Series S and say that it's holding back the development of their games. Sometimes games are delayed, or at least they blame it on that for why games are delayed. Black Myth Wukong famously was like, we can't get the Xbox Series S version to work, so we're going to delay it. And they did, and then it came out for Xbox Series S. So it just looked like they just didn't dedicate enough resources to it. Anyway, back to the root of your question here, which is working on Xbox Series S, making other versions better. Are we going to see more of that? Yes, I think we're going to see more of that, not because it's like an edict or some trend in the industry that everyone's going to follow. I think we're going to follow that because they're going to have to, because their hand is being forced by the consumer and the hardware manufacturers. Obviously, Nintendo has been living in this low-tech space pretty much since the GameCube. Usually its hardware is underpowered compared to PlayStation and Xbox, and so developers have been kind of forced to have one foot in yesterday while they've been developing games, trying to figure out if it'll work on Switch and now Switch 2 or not. In most cases, developers just said no. It's not going to happen. And so you really got no third-party games on the first Switch. Or if you did, they were kind of games from the early PS4 era or whatever. Or they would stream them sometimes with like this weird cloud tech. Anyway, it was definitely a detriment to the Switch. Now, the Switch 2 is different because it works with this magic called frame generation. And optimization is going to be a thing. But here's the thing. Frame generation, like DLSS, and PlayStation has its own proprietary version of it, and everybody's working on some way to generate extra frames. That is the future. And that's why this stuff has been built into these consoles, including the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, I'll say this. Some of the big games like Star Wars Outlaws on Switch 2, it's not really looking good just because of frame generation. They actually kind of wrote to the metal a little bit there, and I think that game actually would be running natively. I'm not 100% sure on that. But that's the case with a lot of the games so far, is that they're actually not using the DLSS on Switch 2. They're just writing to the metal, and the games seem to look okay. In the case of Star Wars Outlaws, it even had ray tracing. So I don't know that what we're going to see is developers either being forced or by choice learning how to optimize. And I will admit, I think maybe what you're getting at here a little bit, NeoJD, is that developers have kind of gotten lazy. And it's not really their fault because it's the tools that they've been given that have made the job easier. Obviously, AI is a recent topic everyone's talking about, but there's stuff like middleware back in the early aughts. Like, instead of having to build your own engine, you could just basically rent this engine from somebody else and you could just make your game. That was a big step towards making development easier. And then the frame generation stuff with DLSS, it's basically letting developers create 4K 120 frames per second games when they have no business making 4K 120 frames per second games. So optimization, I think they're gonna be forced to at least do it a little bit, because again, as you mentioned, the PS6, there's going to be a really powerful version, and then a handheld, and then a kind of PlayStation's version of Xbox Series S, like a weaker version of PlayStation 6 for a little bit cheaper. So yeah, developers are going to have to learn how to write code for that weaker platform to make sure they get good results out of it. But still, in the end, they're probably mostly going to rely on frame generation like DLSS to get those games up to speed with the other versions. The other thing, too, I would say is that with Xbox Series S, developers, most games did come out for Xbox Series, so most of them were forced to learn how to work with Series S and optimize. But with the PlayStation being the market leader, you're not going to have a choice. You're just going to have to. And that will be good for everybody. It will be good for Switch too, because all those lower powered PlayStation 6 games will fit nicely on the Switch 2. And then also at Xbox. Xbox is putting out a handheld that's probably not going to be as powerful with its bigger console. This guarantees that there will be games for that handheld. So this is a case where all boats will rise with the tide. And so I think it's a good thing, actually, that PlayStation is going to offer this weaker powered platform. And I'll be honest with you, it's only really capable of doing that because of all the technology that we have now. Xbox was kind of like ahead of the curve there a little bit, thinking about having a cheaper version of its console, not knowing if developers eventually would be like, screw this, I'm not doing this, and they never did. Despite the fact that nobody really buys Xbox games anymore. So I think the future is bright. I think the future is going to be that pretty much every game comes out for every platform. I think that's ideal. Some may look a little better or worse than others, but with all this new technology that developers have, I think you're going to be surprised at how on an even keel they really are. Okay, next up we have a question from Commander Fett. With RFK Jr. trying to connect mass shootings to video games and a video game-related message on the Charlie Kirk shooter's bullets, do you think there will be any changes coming from the industry or government? Do you think games like Grand Theft Auto 6 will face more scrutiny? Alright, well first of all, I'm not going to get into all the minutiae and the political angles of the Charlie Kirk stuff. I'm just going to talk about the game-related stuff around this question. This is a big question that people have a lot of questions about, and so I am going to answer it, but I'm not going to get into the political side of it for the most part. Some parts of it I have to get into to discuss this topic. So the first thing I am going to say is that RFK is an idiot. I don't care what political persuasion you are, he's an idiot. He should not have the job that he has, and all he's doing right now is trying to basically use the lowest common denominator excuse for what happened. That's it. That's all that's happening. He thinks that we've forgotten about the 80s, 90s, and early aughts where we went through this whole thing where they tried to blame stuff on video games, and he's reminded that all these other places in the world have the same video games, music, and everything else, and they're not shooting each other. So it's a very simple argument to dispel, but here's the thing, that doesn't matter. All he's saying that for, even though he probably knows, even though he's dumb, he probably also knows that it's complete BS. He just has to give the followers of his ideology something to use as an excuse, and that is what's happening there. So does it suck? Yes. Is there anything going to come out of it? We'll see, because here's the thing, in the past I would have said no, because there used to be rational people in charge. Now, I mean, let's just be honest, America has become fascist. The current government is shutting down any TV network, TV station, TV show that says stuff that it doesn't like. And basically what it's doing, and this is why it's fascism, is it's using its power of government to influence creativity. So for example, with CBS, like a month or so ago, it was trying to merge with some other media company and it had been stalled. And basically Trump just extorted CBS and said, hey, we've got this lawsuit against you, and if you settle that, then we'll let your merger. That's fascism. Trying to control the free press and free speech using government power, that is fascism. And so that's what we have. And so based upon what's happening right now with like Jimmy Kimmel and all this stuff, Rockstar is so glad that Grand Theft Auto 6 was delayed, because it's going to get bad. If you think it's this bad, it's only been like 9 months. Imagine another 5 months from now what it's going to be like. Imagine in another 2-3 years what it's going to be like. Like if Grand Theft Auto 6 just parodies right-wingers, it's going to be... I don't even know what'll happen, honestly. Because here's the thing, Rockstar actually has the power and the fan base to still be successful even if these fascistic policies try to influence Rockstar. It can say, go ahead, do what you gotta do, because this game is gonna sell like hotcakes no matter what you do, and you talking about it and all your news shows is just gonna help it sell more. Here's the problem though. You can't do that with everything. Not every developer makes Grand Theft Auto. And so the government comes to them and says, hey, we don't want you having these themes in your games that go against what we're trying to impart on society. And so if you don't do what we want, then we're going to impose some kind of financial penalty upon you. Again, it's fascism. And a lot of companies aren't big enough and powerful enough to withstand it, and so they give in. Rockstar is big enough and Grand Theft Auto is big enough that it can push back. So we are right now headed towards a huge culture clash. It could get really bad. It doesn't matter that Jeff Keighley went on Fox News 22 years ago and made them look like morons. We're going through the whole process again because these people know it's wrong. They don't care. They just want power. And as long as they can give their followers some flimsy excuse that they can share on social media when people call them out for it, that's all they need. So, yeah, I think things are going to get really bad. And Grand Theft Auto 6, considering typically the type of content that's in Grand Theft Auto, it could get really bad. Okay, our next question comes from What is Delicious? Games are the only entertainment medium I can think of where you cannot skip forward. Books, movies, TV shows, podcasts, and music, you can fast forward. Some games do include chapter select, but only after you've beaten the game. Death Stranding 2 allows you to pretend you won against bosses, which is great, but you still can't flip to the end. Do you think games should allow this, or is there more to how games force everyone to progress linearly? What is Delicious? You are batting 1,000 with your questions, man. You are just doing an amazing job. Please keep asking me questions. I love questions that really make me think, and this one does. So, here's the thing. You're right. Games are a different medium. Games are a different art because we can interact with them and we can manipulate the art ourselves. Most of the other stuff that you mentioned is something that somebody else creates and you just passively consume it. You have no control over what happens next, what's written next, what is said next, what is shown next. You just have to take what the artist gives you. With games, you have some agency over what happens, how it happens, where it happens, why it happens. And developers obviously have to allow for that freedom of choice inside the art project that they're working on or whatever. So they're intrinsically different. While they're still art, it's a different kind of art that probably has different rules and parameters that will apply. So that's what I would say first, is that talking about this, comparing games to these other things, it's helpful for this question, but in practicality, it probably doesn't work because of how people consume the art, how they interact with the art. So it's an apples to oranges comparison, to say the least. But this is something I've been doing for like 30 years, comparing games to other forms of art. So I'm going to do my best to be able to do that here. Should people be allowed to just skip around games or skip to the end if they want to? My knee-jerk reaction is yes. Because the way I look at it is like, you paid for this product, you should be able to consume it and use it however you want to. However, as an artist myself, at least I feel like I'm an artist, your mileage may vary with that, but I've been making music and art and all kinds of stuff my entire life. So I do consider myself an artist on some level anyway. And so as an artist, I look at it like, particularly with games, part of your job is to take the player by the hand and lead them through this experience. There are certain games that are just never going to work if you're allowed to jump around. I mean, they'll work, like literally work, like you could play the level or whatever, but it breaks the narrative. If you jump later into a game and something happens in the plot and it's like this huge thing, it ruins the whole game. Now, here's the thing. You'll have the choice. You have the choice to do it. And so ultimately, that's where I come back to. It should probably be okay. Now, from the artist perspective, you don't want people to consume your art that way. You don't want somebody to get a big plot spoiler in the first hour that they were supposed to get at hour 16 or whatever. Because as the artist or as the writer, you're building everything up to that moment so that people care about it, so that it affects them in certain ways. When people can just jump forward and just watch that cutscene or whatever, it kind of destroys all that. But then you got to remember there's this thing called YouTube, where people can just go and just watch the entire game being played anyway. We're in a different landscape than we've ever been in. So I would say, yeah, I think people should be able to play the game however they want to. And I do understand that it would make developers kind of sad to say, I created it this way, I wanted you to consume it this way, and instead you consumed it the other way. As long as you leave the option there so people can play the game the way that you intended it, and the jump around option is truly optional, and it's just something extra, then there's really no reason why people should care. Now, maybe the other perspective from the developer is like, but yeah, if you do that, if you jump around the game and you end up not liking the game, then you're not going to like the franchise, you're not going to buy any more of our games, etc. I can get that angle, but I think in today's day and age, if you get the messaging out there as a developer that you're looking out for the player and you're consumer focused and you're like, look, I want you to make sure that you get what you want and you get what you want, then a lot of times like the community will rally around that developer or that person and support the game. So it's a very complicated question, a great question, but there's really no cut and dried answer. Okay, that's it for another, I think, awesome edition of Ask Shane Anything. If you're watching this show on YouTube, like give it a like or a share. Again, I think this show deserves way more views than it's getting on YouTube. So if you like it, share it out there on the wilds of the internet. That would be awesome. Again, a special thanks to everyone who's pledging anything at patreon.com/sifted. For just $5 a month, you get all our content early. For an extra $2, you can make sure that this show keeps happening. And again, to make sure this show keeps happening, we need your questions. If you've never asked a question before, head on over there. Don't be shy. Go to sifted.net. In the header there, there's a link. Click it. Go to our forums. Ask me a question, and you could be the next star of Ask Shane Anything. So have yourselves a great week, and don't forget that sleep is for the dead. Play games instead.